Everybody, it's Hussein Kabani, your favorite broker, and today we have who we call Kaz.
Thanks.
It's been a couple of years, and I don't think I've still nailed his name. Khizar?
No.
Khizar? Come on. What
you
is
get
it?
closer and then it gets further
I know
away.
it gets bad. So come on.
It's a tough one, I know.
All right.
It's pronounced Khizar.
Khizar.
Yeah, but it's funny because no one can say it.
Yeah, no one can.
No.
Yeah.
So it got morphed into Khizar.
Yeah.
Friend groups.
Yeah.
Work.
And now you just introduce yourself as Kaz.
Now I'm a third.
Yeah.
Version now. It's a nickname that somebody else gave me actually.
Okay.
I didn't come up with it.
Nice.
From like my martial art ventures.
Cool.
And then it kind of stuck as well. So from Khizar to Khizar to now Kaz. So whatever works with you or you guys, it works with me.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, we got 3 versions now.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys. So you're probably wondering why I'm here with Kaz and what we're going to be chatting about. So really what's interesting to me over the last little while is this. So I bought my first place like almost 20 years ago. And obviously the marketplace was really different at that time, right? And talking to like a 24-year-old right now and saying like, hey, what is your outlook on real estate? Because I'm very dependent on, you know, this business obviously and where it's going, and then understanding what the market is thinking that is actually about to enter the real estate market as well, to figure out how we can actually cater to it and what their thought process is. So we could basically say, hey, are these going to be people that we can actually help in the market, or are they probably going to go a different direction? Just based on where real estate is going, it's seeming like it's kind of getting harder and harder to get in. And price is going to be a big elephant in the room type of conversation, but I want to come back to that in a second, okay? Mm-hmm. The first thing I want to basically ask is that just in general, like, what is the motivation level? For me, my motivation level 20 years or 21 years ago was really, really high. Like, that was a thing I had to do because for me, it established the cornerstone of building a strong financial future and a strong lifestyle. Mm-hmm. That was my cornerstone, and I was very adamant about doing that one way or the other. How do you guys feel like that 24-ish year market? Like, how does that feel? How do you guys feel about real estate?
That's a great question. So, don't want it to sound like a cop-out, but I think that everyone's experience is going to be the same, right? The way you said for you, it was absolutely crucial when you were in that age group to kind of buy into real estate. And I can speak for myself, but I can also speak about what I'm hearing, right? So I'm talking about 30 to about 30, 40 people a week and asking them that question, what you just asked me, which is like, hey, what do you think about this whole thing called real estate?
Yeah.
And because I've been doing this for a couple months now, and like I said, every week I'm talking about 30, 40 people, I've gotten a bit of mixed responses. But I could still group those mixed responses into like, let's say 2 to 3 different categories. Okay. And I want to talk about those categories in a bit. And also call out that all 3 of those categories, I see us as realtors being able to help.
Okay.
So the first category that I want to talk about that I'm noticing is the active planners. So even if they're 21 to 26, they're very much interested, the way that you said you were, in getting something. They want to buy into this market. They believe in real estate, and they want to own something. Okay. So they're saving every penny. They're living with their parents to try to save up. They are looking out at what's on the market, and I know they are because when they ask me certain questions, I know they're not beginner questions.
Right.
So you know that they have their eyes closely on this.
So you got some planners that are really interested in buying real estate.
And it's super exciting and hopeful for me to see, right? As somebody in that age group myself, you know, hey, there's others out there as well that are really have their head in the game. Cool. So definitely I do see interest in this first category. Now, I said that I think we can help all these categories. This group, I think we can help by giving them the most up-to-date information or pointing them in a better direction. So, you know, they're building off of what they already know.
Sure.
And then the second group that I'm noticing are kind of the folks that are midway. So they're like the curious, open to learning more. You know, they're a little bit on the fence, leaning one way or the other, but they're open to listening to what we have to say if we have a conversation with them. So, you know, they are kind of coasting through. They're sometimes on them, you know, online, sometimes they're not. And they want to know like the options that are out there. Right. And I have an example of that. Like I was just recently speaking to somebody that I know from Bowmanville, which is, you know, one of the cities that I used to live in at one point. And he said to me like, yeah, absolutely, I want to own. So I'm hoping by 30 I can own this because I got to start saving up now. So that tells me he's open to the conversation. He's open to owning real estate, but he's not dead set on owning it. Yeah, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
So he's somebody that I would group in that middle kind of group where he wants to own, but you know, it doesn't need to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the second group that I've been experiencing and talking to directly. And then the last group, and I think this is a bit more interesting, are the disinterested folks.
Okay.
They're not really excited about this thing called real estate. And there's a couple of reasons for it, right?
Yeah.
One we talked about, which is the pricing thing.
Yeah.
They're discouraged. They're
They
disinterested.
just feel like it's too high.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
feel that way. They're disinterested because they're discouraged. They see
Yeah.
what's out there. They go, there's no way I can afford this.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't necessarily disagree with you if you think that way. I understand it is expensive. But they're the disinterested bunch. And then there's another subset of that. They're not discouraged. They just don't care.
Yeah.
They don't want to own property.
Yeah.
They're coasting through, like I said, the 21 to 26 age group. They're saving some money with mom and dad. They're happy to get a bit of money because they just got a job.
Yeah.
So they're, spending it on the shoes or the vacation. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we've all gone through that
Yeah,
phase. I'm
yeah.
still in that phase in a way.
Yeah.
So they're kind of coasting through when they're comfortable.
Okay.
So those are the kind of the three groups.
The three groups.
Yeah,
right?
and I think all three can be helped in a certain way.
For sure. But like, where do you think, like, I mean, in terms of percentage wise, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I figured we're going to have some people that are gun-ho, some are in the middle, and some are just like, nah, it's not for me anymore because it's too expensive. In terms of percentage wise, like, where do you see this being? Like, how many people are like that you talk to and you're aware of that are like, definitely I'm going to do this, or not sure, or I don't want it? How do you split that up?
It's a little bit balanced, to be honest. The
So
group that's-
33.3?
I'm gonna go with, like, let's say 20% that are not interested at all. Like,
Okay.
they're kind of closed off
Okay.
to the idea of owning real estate.
Yeah.
That leaves behind, let's say, 80.
Yeah.
And then from the 80, I think it would be like, let's say a 40-40 split between the active planners and those that are
half
kind of
and half,
midway.
basically.
Yeah, but that last group that I said that are kind of closed off to it, I think it's the least percentage. With that being said, right, with how pricing goes or how attitude shift, maybe that percentage increases too, right?
Right.
But I think it's about 40-40-20 from my experience of talking to these folks.
And you know what? Like, actually, now that you say that, like, it's basically was the same for me too, right? Because the thing is that when I was 20 or 21, whatever, when I wanted to buy real estate, there was a group of people that were actually very serious about it. And then there were people that just didn't even care and didn't bother saving. Like for me, I would have been able to, like, I was trying to save every single penny like you do, like to try to put towards real estate. And some people just didn't care. They were out doing whatever they were going to do. And they didn't have actually a mechanism to actually save some money to get into real estate after the fact. So yeah, like, it's kind of encouraging to hear that, because it's the same kind of thing that I was like that actually happened to me. But I mean, like, now there is a bigger kind of challenge, right? Based on pricing. Like, basically what we've seen now is that the pricing has really accelerated, and the actual household income, there is a bigger gap between the two, right? As we're going almost every year, the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So how are people feeling about pricing? Like, for me, I knew at some point I could probably buy a detached property and whatnot. Like, what are the expectations, I guess, for people at this point right now?
Yeah.
Are they in check?
Yeah, it's intense out there from my experience, right? Like, simple math. What, you want to try to buy something for $1 million?
Yeah.
Try coming
Or
up
what
with
you can even get for $1 million
exactly.
right now,
It isn't
right?
much these days, right?
Yeah.
But let's say the golden number, $1 million. It's easier to do the math on it. If you're a first-time home buyer, maybe you get it with the 5-10%. But even that, or let's say 20%, is $200,000.
Yeah.
Like, nobody who's 24 years old that I know of, including myself, had $200K ready to invest.
Yeah.
So it's intimidating to kind of try to run the numbers. And again, it's only on the million.
Yeah.
Things are much more than that.
Yeah.
So I think there's fear.
Yeah.
I felt it from talking to this age group. And again, I felt it myself.
Yeah.
And so the next question to that is, if you're afraid, then what next?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do with this fear?
Yeah.
And there's, like, that's where you kind of have to get creative as somebody who's a 22-year-old who just got out of university.
Yeah.
And I have examples of that on what creativity looks like. And again, I went through some of that myself. So one is, I'm a stickler for Excels. In fact, I think you kind of influenced me on that as well. We've known each other years.
Yeah.
So I have, like, this Excel template with a bunch of different formulas in it, where since I was 18 years old, 2018, I remember was when I started, I tracked every single penny coming in and coming out.
Yeah.
And to this day, I can point you to those Excels.
Yeah.
I know exactly what I spent and what I made on September 22nd, 2018.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still do that.
Yeah.
So you have to get creative, and it's annoying to do that, to open up your Excel every month or every 2
How many
months.
people are actually doing that, though, that you know of?
I don't think many are,
Yeah.
right? So That's the first thing, right?
So if people are not doing that, then how are they expecting to? If we're talking about the group of people that said that they're definitely going to buy or are on the fence about buying,
Yeah.
if they're not doing something like that, what are they doing?
Well, I think the ones that are the active planners, the
Yeah.
first group that we talked about,
They
I
are
think
the ones
they're doing
tracking.
that. Yeah, I think so.
So you got
I think so.
40% of people roughly that are
Yes.
actually tracking, which is a pretty decent number.
For sure. And
Even
then
if you
got
take that
40.
other 40 chunk down and say half of them are tracking, it's still a pretty decent number.
And you know how we talked about, like, as realtors, where do you fit yourself into these three groups in terms of providing value? I think for that other 40% that's kind of on the fence, that may not be doing those Excels, I think that leaves room for us to talk to them about that as an option, right?
Yeah.
We're not even talking about selling real estate. We're talking about giving them solutions to get them to that point.
Yeah, it's more, honestly, yeah, like I even look at that and I'm like, hey, it's even about understanding your own numbers. Forget about buying real estate at this point right now.
Yeah.
If you don't understand your own numbers, you're not really going to get far anyways. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Real estate is like, for sure, it's the next level kind of thing for a lot of people right now to try to buy.
For sure.
But even if you don't understand your numbers, you're not even going to get to
100%.
any other point, right?
100%. And like, just, sorry to cut you off, like, a simple question to the folks watching, right? Like, if you're a 26-year-old, if I hypothetically ask you, how much are you going to spend this month in fixed expenses? Do you have that number off the top of your head?
Yeah.
And like you're saying,
well, it's like running your life as a business.
Yeah, in
right?
a way,
like
that's
you should
a really
know your
good,
numbers.
yeah, that's a really good way to describe it, right? Like, can you say to yourself right now, this month I'm going to spend this much money?
Yeah.
I think you may be able to tell that answer.
Yeah.
I think I'm be able to come up with that answer, but that's only the 40%, right? So for the other 40%, maybe you want to look into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do 1 month of spreadsheets and say, okay, this is where I spent, this is where I didn't.
Yeah.
How much am I saving? Or
am
I saving?
Or like even come up with a budget. I usually found for myself anyways, because we're talking about budgeting, is that I actually would pre-spend all of my money. So when I got my bi-weekly paychecks, I would actually allocate them already. I would actually forcefully spend the money.
Wow.
So it would actually be already allocated for. So in my Excel sheet, very simple sheet, I would actually say, okay, I'm going to get paid on this date. And then I would actually write in all the expenses and show. And then if I wanted to spend more money because I wanted to go out because it's a friend's birthday, at that time, like spending $50 for me was a massive deal. I would put it in and all my lines go red underneath that because of that simple formula.
And it's like,
I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how much can I spend? $22 at this guy's birthday party? I don't know if I can actually even show up with that kind of fun.
100%.
You know what I mean?
And you know what's interesting about that? I think the actual running the numbers is only the first step.
Yeah.
The second step is realizing it went red and deciding not to spend the money.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess it just depends on what your motivation level is, right? And how clearly you can actually see the outcome of it. So it becomes really hard and blurry when you can't actually see yourself being able to purchase that real estate and how that's actually going to feel. So sometimes I think people might step back and say, hey, it's not even really a reality. What am I even trying to do this for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Like, so I basically kind of said this, like I knew that I was going to walk a path, okay, when I started my real estate purchasing. So I bought a crappy little condo at Kennedy and 401. Ideally, it wasn't where I wanted to be. From there, I actually stuffed all of my money into this mortgage, ended up selling it for $3,000 less than what I purchased it for 3 years later, and moved to Young and Shepherd, which was a much better bet because that was the first $90,000 I've actually made on real estate from owning it for 4.5 years. And then from there, I bought a detached property. It was kind of like a path. I knew I was going to end up buying like a detached double car garage home because that's what I wanted, okay? So that's what I want and what my vision is. Like, how do you see people your age kind of like, what's their path that they're looking at in real estate? Like, how are they looking at entering it and where do they think they're going to go from there?
Yeah. It's funny, right before we even got here and started this, I showed you a message off camera where somebody messaged me and was interested in learning more about pre-construction.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one solid path that people are looking to start with, right?
Okay.
So they want to try to get in with that flexible deposit structure, pay less over time, and then have that be the starting point.
Yeah. And not even have an existing mortgage, like buying basically a piece of paper right now.
Exactly. And then
locking it
happens.
up and then not having to make those monthly mortgage payments and deal with the interest rate that's happening right now.
100%. But the amazing point that I think you just made that needs to be highlighted further is for you and your story, it wasn't you got in and that was the end all be all. That was just the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? You went from one, you sold that, you moved into a detached, and then from there, I know your story of how much you've built it from there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the part that not everyone in my age group is aware of, which is this isn't some get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
Real estate is a very long-term game.
Yeah.
So along the way when you are playing this game, sure, pivot where you need to, and then have people around you that can, give you that trusted advice.
Yeah.
But know that it's gonna be multiple steps.
And the other thing also is that like obviously it's very clear to me right now having done it already. But I mean, obviously, when I was walking that path, it wasn't very clear.
Yeah.
Like you had an idea of what you're going to do, but like the point I guess I'm trying to make is that if you don't walk that path, then you're not going to be able to learn. And of course, with learning comes mistakes and screwing up,
Yeah,
right? So
for
like,
sure.
there's a lot of screwing up I've done to actually learn what I've learned at the same time, right? So,
For sure.
but when you go to the next step is where you're going to learn more. And a simple way is not even a financial thing, okay? When I lived in my ghetto condo at Kennedy and 401, I dressed in a certain way. I worked in a warehouse or whatever else like that. From that warehouse job, I got promoted to like an office job. Like I was an admin, like a really basic admin, but I was like, wow, office job. And I moved to Young and Shepherd, and I'm looking around at everybody in the elevator. They're dressed really nicely, and I look like the odd one out. You know what I mean? So it changed my mentality a little bit too. Is basically saying, hey, like, you know, I like, you live in this kind of neighborhood, you should fit the role or something. So it like, as I take these steps, I learn a little bit more, not even just about real estate, but about maybe taking care of myself better, having a better presentation. So the further I push, the more I learn, and things get better at the same time, right?
No, for sure.
Versus sitting in the same spot.
For sure.
But so what is the trajectory? Like, have you talked to people saying, okay, fine, you're going to start with the pre-con. Do they have an idea of what they're going to do after that? Or are they thinking, hey, I'm going to grab this 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and this is going to be awesome for me and my family, my future family?
More the latter.
Yeah.
I think that right now, because things are so intense, people just want to get into this party.
And just basically say, hey, I'd be happy if I got this.
Yes, and then I'm going to figure it out.
That's an awesome mentality, dude, because when I got my first place, that's what I thought too. I said, hey, as long as I kind of get into the market, I have this thing, and you know, it's going to take me 25 years to pay it off. And what's the worst case? I'm going to end up with this thing. That's it, right?
For sure.
So I actually am encouraged by having this conversation here right now, because there's so many similarities. The numbers are completely different. The situation is different, but the similarities are really there.
For sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about the more concrete example that I went through in a different video.
Sure.
But this attitude of, hey, let me get in and I'll figure it out, is something that I can personally relate to, right? For context, like I recently made my first real estate investment a couple months ago, which is in a pre-con. And my attitude was, hey, I had this money saved up and I was just waiting to pull the trigger. I don't know what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years from now. But the point is, hopefully, I'm going to have options to figure out which direction I want to go through, right? Whether it's, hey, when this pre-construction opportunity is existing and I can move into it, maybe I do move into it. Maybe I'm married at that point and I start a family. Maybe I sell that thing. Maybe I give it to my parents. Maybe I rent it out. The point is, I'll have options. Yeah, and I think I've not decided on those options yet, and I don't need to be.
Yeah, and the other cool thing we talked about too is that you're going to have to pay your deposit up to like 20% on this thing, right?
Yep. Spread out.
But the thing is that what is this thing going to close in 3 to 5 years? Well, you could run into an awesome resale deal right now on a townhouse or something, and your income could have went up. And for $800K, you could be like, you know what? Actually, with this one, I could put 5% down, or 5.5%, or 7.5% down, and I could just actually buy this place. And you could, and guess what? Your deposit is still paid up to the 20%, which is what you're required to close on the next place, right?
There you go.
So there is a different strategy here. It's either you're going to stick on the path and close on this pre-con and do whatever you want with it, but you still have an option in the middle over here. If you see a really good deal and you have the funds available and the income, you can actually just pick that up at the lower down payment, pay the CMHC, who cares? I've done it 2-3 times, and then still be able to close on this other thing. So you locked in an opportunity already.
For sure. I think if you're fortunate enough to be in an environment where you can put aside money every month, this comes back to the priority of a 23-year-old, right? Or 24-year-old. Like, it's awesome that I think we're having this conversation, because this age group, if they're not already thinking about it, should begin to do something like this if that's their priority.
Get into the pre-con.
Yeah, so when you do see something like pre-con or like that awesome resale opportunity, you can do something about it. But if that's not where your head is at, and again, you're caught up in the day-to-day expenses, expenditure, you may not have the ability to pull the trigger on something.
Basically,
like
it's going to be something like that's a long-term planning. And there are other videos that we've done and about basically putting money possibly into your RRSP, a first-time home savings account, things like this, like taking advantage of these vehicles also, right? Like, of course, with the RRSP, you're going to have to pay it back. But what an awesome way to kind of like lock up your money. If you're working for a company that does RRSP deductions, like how easy would it be to say, hey, put 5% or 10% into it? And I call it like a forced savings. They're taking it right out of your paycheck. That money's not even coming into your bank account. So you don't even have to be responsible enough to save. You know what I mean? 100%. I actually like that. So I was doing that when I was working corporately. Even I've shared this example is when I got my first mortgage, luckily I was in a position where I was getting job promotions and making more money at that time as well. And I would actually calculate what my net difference is going to be of what I'm going to get paid. And I would call the mortgage company and I'd be like, hey, you know what? Start taking out, $150 more or whatever. So I wouldn't even let the money actually hit my bank account. Because honestly, if I have the money, even today, my mentality is the same thing. I have the money sitting in my account. I'm looking on Auto Trader. I'm like, hey, you know what? It's a good time to upgrade my car. Or I'm looking around for other crap that I probably don't need. So what I've learned about myself about money, and it might work for other people as well, is that as soon as I have money, I try to lock it up into something. Like right now, I just did a second mortgage for somebody because I'm like, I don't want to look at this money sitting here, and I'd rather just lock it up in a secure investment where I know the money is going to be safe and I'm making 12 to 15% on this money, and it's going to come back to me back in a lump sum.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And these are other examples of being creative and tools, right?
Yeah.
That you can use in this age group.
Sure.
So whether it's the RRSP, whether it's having it taken out of your paycheck so you don't look at it.
Yeah.
We talked about the Excels.
Yeah.
We talked about saving where you can, reprioritizing. And then another one that just comes to mind is, if you want to get a place, whether it's even a lease or you want to rent for now, look into where there's student accommodations where you can split a kitchen or a living room with a bunch of other students. Or let's say you have a partner and you want to move out with that person. That's one more person you can share your costs with instead of doing this on your own.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I was going to ask you something like that. So it's basically even say you and a friend, right? If you wanted to get into the market, how does your age group feel about that right now? Yeah. Maybe neither one of you guys move into the place. You guys just strictly buy it in the sense of saying, hey, we're going to buy it, we're going to get into it, we're going to rent it. So at least we could secure something. Is that something more people are talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have a relatable example for that. Most recently, you and I talked about Calgary Pre-Con, and I was speaking to somebody who was interested in learning more. Yeah. And at the end of it, he ended up buying a pre-construction investment with another friend of his, and all three of them, I know them both personally as well. Yeah. We're all three friends. Yeah. And those two bought into it together. Right. So I do think attitudes are shifting. People are more, trusting of one another, and it's not just about trusting and being friendly. Sometimes it necessitates it, right? The market. Sometimes you need to pair up with someone.
So you see that, are they now using real estate more as an investment thing or more of a living in thing? Because my thing was definitely it's going to increase, but I want to live in it. So has the focus changed a little bit to say, hey, maybe I'm not going to end up living in it, but I still need to buy a chunk into this thing because it's a great investment long run?
Absolutely. I think it's more they want to, they're open to not living in it. They want it to be an entry point from an investment standpoint and then figure it out from there. And I think there's two reasons for that, right? Why the attitude has shifted. I think one, COVID impacted a lot of things. You stepped away from this idea that you need to stay locked down to one geographical location. Yeah. So people are open to investing in other places, whether it's Calgary or even other parts of Canada or even outside of Canada, because they say, hey, even if I can work one place but invest elsewhere, that's doable because of my work from home.
So they really believe in the real estate class, the asset.
I think so.
The asset itself.
I think so. And then I mentioned there were two reasons, right? I think the second reason is the generation shift, right? My parents, or even my grandparents before that, their attitude was play it safe, or at least maybe from an immigrant standpoint. And I come from an immigrant family, which was, hey, get into some place, don't bump into the walls. Keep your head down and secure your children's future. Yeah, that was the attitude from my parents, and I would say maybe from your parents as well, right? You would relate to that. Yeah. But now it's more, hey, why do we need to do that? We can take more risks. We have the confidence. We have
build up a bit of a base, and then you can push a little.
And
bit
let's get out there. It's gonna be scary, but hey, so what?
Yeah.
So I think the generation shift and COVID impacted this.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, cool.
For sure.
So is there anything else you want to kind of add in here of what that 24 to 28-year-old demographic is thinking overall?
Yeah, for sure.
And how they're going to come up with this money really, other than savings? Do you think that they have any other ideas that they're thinking of how they're going to come up with money?
I know that there's some folks that from their paycheck, they'll put stuff into the stock market. I know we talked about the S&P off camera, but the S&P isn't kind of, an aggressive way to make money. No. And I'm talking about that from experience myself, right? When I was 16, 17 years old, I was putting in $50 a month for several years, and then I made a 6% return on it. Yeah. That isn't much money. Yeah. So, but I know that's one thing that's out there that people are talking about. But long story short, to wrap this up, what I do want to say is this. It's funny, I read recently on my phone somewhere that salespeople, some of the greatest salespeople, aren't necessarily selling anything. They're listening. Yeah. They're providing the right information, and not just the right information, but information that's most relevant to the person they're talking to. Yeah. And right now we're talking about the 24-year-olds or the 21 to 26-year-olds. Yeah. So what I think about really, now that I'm in the business, is do to solve somebody's problem,
Yeah.
not push a sale on them.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I'd be doing a good job.
Yeah.
So I think some of the greatest salespeople are trying to understand where the problems are at, which is what me and you are doing right now in this conversation.
Yeah.
And then making sure we can give the right information to try to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Not come to the table with a solution right away.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do that.
And you know what? Like, I'm the first person to say maybe it's not right for that person to buy real estate. Maybe. And I believe it's not right for everyone to buy real estate either. There are people out there that I know that own real estate that probably shouldn't own real estate, or people that have bought real estate that shouldn't have bought real estate. You know what I mean? So there are those people out there. And to your point, yeah, we should be understanding people of where they're going with it, so we can actually try to help them get to where they want to go. And it may not be actually buying real estate.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about it to kind of continue to have these conversations that I'm having. I told, off camera that it's about 40 people a week I'm chatting with.
Yeah.
And it's just so fun to have these conversations to understand where people's heads are at without necessarily coming up with a solution right now.
Absolutely. Cool. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this little chat about like how the next generation is kind of getting into real estate. If you are in that boat right now that you're trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do? I'm 21, I'm 26 years old, and I want a chunk of this real estate market. How do I get in? We'll be more than happy to sit down with you guys. We could set up a call, or you guys can come by the office. We'll sit down with you, and our idea is not to actually shove real estate down your throat, because like I said, it's not for everybody, but we can actually have a conversation around it and figure out if it is something that is going to work well for you, and then try to figure out what the approach is. And that approach might not be in the next 3 to 6 months. It might actually be a 2 or 3 or 4 year plan, but we could kind of figure out what that looks like once we kind of chat, because like I've been saying recently, it's like everyone's situation is a little bit different. Make sense?
For sure. I agree.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Until next time, guys, remember one thing. Yeah, Kabani, get sold.
Get sold.
Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold. Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold. Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold. Sell it, sell it, sell it, sell it, sold.